Today's video is one I've wanted to make for quite a while because I'm going to be counting down my top 10 classic series Doctor Who figures from character options. Now, I'm cheating a little bit because there's that many excellent figures in this line. I've had to split this into two videos. So today I'm going to be focusing on the top 10 classic monsters and aliens. So without further ado, let's get started. So in at number 10, I have the Ice Warrior. Obviously, this is a classic villain, reoccurred in several serials in the 60s and the 70s, but my choices are all about the figure and not necessarily the character. As much as I have love for all of these characters, it does come down to the attributes of the individual figure itself. So what's so good about the Ice Warrior? Well, I have to say, first of all, it's the mould. Straight away you'll notice that this is a completely unique figure with all unique parts. Let's take a look at the hand here, for example, which is a giant pincer. This is just very nicely designed. The paint taps running throughout this mould are excellent as well. There's a lovely little black paint wash running throughout it all just to really accentuate every groove and detail, and it's just very, very nicely done. Also, I really like the rubber piece that goes over the torso, and it hides some of the articulation, some of these unseemly joints that you get in the crotch area, which is absolutely fantastic. And again, we can see that in the shoulders as well, which is just brilliant. I also really love this little feature here where if you shine a light through the side panel on the side of the head, the eyes light up and glow. And I just think this looks really effective and yeah, really kind of creepy looking. So I think, top marks for this. In at number 9, I have Sutekh. Now, there have been a couple of different iterations of Sutekh in the character options line, but this is the one that came as part of the Pyramids of Mars box set. First off, as you'd expect from character options at this point, their sculpting is absolutely pitch perfect. This is a really nice, faithful design. And whilst the costume and design is fairly straightforward and simplistic, it is very effective and quite visually striking. Now, you might think that the skirt on this figure is a minus point because it hinders the articulation, and to a degree that is true. Although he has legs under there and he does of course have articulation in under usual that you'd expect, he is restricted very much by this skirt. Likewise, when we look at the shoulder articulation, it is there, he can get his arms out a little bit, but it is hindered by that hard rubber casing of the shoulder pads. So why is he on my top 10? Well, a lot of it has to do with this feature, the electronic light up eyes. There's a button on the back of his head here that when you press it, you get this very bright, very luminous green light up effect, which is absolutely brilliant. I think this is really very, very effective and one of the few figures in a line that utilizes any electronics at all. But also, as an added bonus, he comes with some fantastic extras. Now, he was part of a set, so we got this extra figure here. This, of course, is Scarman, and it's a nice to have, but what's really, really cool is this sarcophagus. This is a wonderful prop to have because it's incredibly screen accurate, the paint apps are really well applied, and it just looks very striking. It goes one better, though, because you can actually open it up, and once you do, you can see inside there is this holographic card that recreates that vortex, that sort of gateway effect that we see in the show, and this is just really, really cool. So I have to say, yeah, put all this together and you've got a real winner. Okay, so I promised myself I was only going to choose one Cyberman on this list. Now, this was a really difficult task because there's been so many fantastic Cybermen in this line. So what made me pick this guy? Well, to be honest, it comes down to just the amount of effort that's gone into it. Now, we've seen the Airshock Cyberman many, many times. It may or may not be your favourite depending on what era of the show you really like, but for me what's really striking about this figure is the paint apps. They've done an incredible job of really recreating this sense of a really damaged, Cyberman has been through the mill, which I think is absolutely fantastic. I love all the green and the cyan and this sort of magenta colours that are splotched all over this figure, and it just really creates that sense that the figure is rusting and bleeding through, and you just really get that sense that you've properly recreated that sense that you get on screen. I've always really liked this rendition of the Cyberman design, and the sculpt here is pretty much perfect, but what these extra paint apps have allowed is really allowed all that detailing to really come through in the sculpt. Rather than just being a flat silver and metallic, what they've done is add these bits of blotchiness that really make all those little grooves and wires and bits and pieces pop. And the pièce de résistance is the fact that the faceplate is removable, and when you do that you can see the skeleton underneath, the human face underneath, and again there's all the wires going in there, the boggled eyes, the teeth. This is just an incredible amount of detail, a wonderful example of attention to detail and very, very careful paint apps here. So this is absolutely phenomenal, I think, and I just think they've knocked out of the park with this figure. Next up, we have the Roger Delgado Master. Now, this figure has seen life several times. It's been released and then re-released, but this is specifically the version that came with the axe on. The only key difference being the accessory that he comes with, because of course he does come with his decompression eliminator. Now, I really think this is a pretty fantastic figure. I think they've really captured the look and the design and the feel of the character from the show. Whilst the costume is fairly simplistic and really very much just one tone, they've managed to capture the feel of the character perfectly, and a lot of that is achieved through the likeness of the head sculpt. I think they've done an absolutely phenomenal job here. They've definitely caught the likeness of Roger Delgado, there's no question of that, and I love, again, the attention to detail, particularly around the eyes and in the beard, the various different paint apps they've used to really bring this to life. As I said, the costume itself is fairly simplistic, and yet there's a certain charm about that, and somehow it manages to be visually interesting and resting on the eyes. And as I said, I really love that it comes with this prop as well, and of course he holds it absolutely perfectly in his grip there, no issues of this falling out of his hands, and it just looks really, really cool. Plus, I really like that they haven't cut any corners and they've thought ahead and included this split in the side to really aid the articulation, so there's no hindrance here for him stretching his legs out to the side or kicking them forwards or backwards, because it works really well with this slit in the rubber. Okay, Daleks. Now, just like the Cybermen, I wasn't going to fill this list with endless Daleks because the character options have done hundreds of them. And there's been some absolutely fantastic figures across the years, and I had to just limit myself to just one. And just as with the Cybermen, this was a really, really tough call to make. But in the end, I opted to go with the Special Weapons Dalek. Now, for anyone who's a fan of the classic Dalek design, you're probably shouting at the screen right now. But again, the way I chose this figure was really to look at it as a figure as opposed to the design. Or at least the design in the TV show. I had to keep those two things separate. Now, I have to say, one of the things that I think does distinguish this figure is the fact that it is very different to any other Dalek. In terms of its look, it is completely unique. But more than that, it's the level of care and attention to detail that's gone into the paint apps on this figure. The whole figure is covered in this wash to create a sense of it being battle damaged, being war weary, and there's just not a part of this figure that hasn't been touched somewhere to make it look like it's been through dust and dirt and rubble. And I think the end result is really, really effective. The other thing is, this Dalek has considerably more articulation. As we can see, it can spin its upper torso right the way around, which I think is a really cool effect. It also has a movable turret, and it manages to go one better with sound effects too. With all of that going on, how could I not add it to the list? In at number 5, we have the Sea Devil. Once again, we have a completely unique mould here. And I think this is a testament to Doctor Who as a show, because all of the monsters are so varied and different and distinctive, and this translates really, really well to action figures. And I think the Sea Devil represents one of the most unique action figures in this collection. Once again, the paint apps on this figure are really, really well applied. There's two tones here. We've got the green, there's a slight bluey wash over it, and of course there is the brown, lighter colours on the face. And the head sculpt is pretty cool, pretty unique, very different to what you'd see from any other action figure range. And I think the likeness is pretty solid. We've got the fins at the back of the head there, the big circular boggled eyes, and of course that very reptilian face. The other element that separates this figure in the line is that it actually uses a cloth overlay over the figure to create that netting tunic that they wear. Not only do I think this is very effective in terms of its visual, but it actually adds an extra layer, an extra texture to the figure as well, which makes it really fun. Underneath, the body mould is still painted. It's got those various different paint washes running through it to give it that slimy, lived-in kind of texture. And we've also got that rubber belt that holds the weapon, which is both functional and stylish. Again, looking at the head sculpt there, and even like the neck, the way this figure is molded and sculpted is pretty awesome. It's so different to anything else in the line. Likewise, if we look at the legs and the feet, no part of this figure has ever been reproduced on any other figure in the line. It's all unique parts, and it's really, really effective, incredibly distinctive, and it really stands out on the shelf. The other point to make is that it's actually oversized as well. It's a little bit taller than the other figures in the line, which is really cool. It gives it this overbearing, broader, taller, more impressive, menacing quality. And as I mentioned, his weapon can be removed from his belt and placed snugly into his hand. It's got a perfect grip, so he holds it nice and tightly, and it looks really, really cool. And again, it's a completely unique individual prop, and I just think this is a really nice touch, and it just looks really, really well rendered. At number 4, I have the first Build-A-Figure from this line. In fact, they only did one other Build-A-Figure for the classic series, which was the Tomb of the Cyberman Cyber Controller. But the K1 robot is the biggest figure in this line. Now, regardless of how you feel about the story or the character, you have to admit that this is a pretty cool toy. Now, sadly, as you can see, I never got all the figures that you needed to build this fella, so you'll have to bear with me because he's a little bit wobbly. But it's not just his size that makes him really impressive. I think they've done a fantastic job with the sculpt. Again, this is something that's completely unique, completely different to any other figure in this line. And I really like all the little details, the little buttons, the tubes, the wires, just the grill on the face there. It all looks really, really authentic. And it feels like there's a lot of love gone into this figure, because it would have been easy to skimp over some of these details, but they're all in there. Everything's been captured, and I just think they've done a really nice job of presenting it to make it look really visually appealing. You could also be forgiven for thinking that the articulation would be a lot weaker on this figure, but it's actually pretty solid. So he's got a ball jointed neck, he can look from side to side and up and down. Now the figures in the main line can't do this, so that's really cool. He does have those shoulder pads there, which again you might think would really severely hinder his articulation, but he can kick his arms out. He's got the hinge at the elbow there, which is great, and he's even got that rotating ball joint in the torso, which is fantastic. They also went the extra mile and gave him his weapon too. Now, this isn't a molded piece, this is a separate piece, but as you can see, he holds it and grips it absolutely perfectly. It's a nice tight grip, there's no danger of this slipping out, and again, the paint apps on the gun, the moulding, the sculpting is pitch perfect. And as I said, in terms of scale, yeah, he towers above the other figures in this line. Now, the K1 robot in this show could vary his size, but they've obviously gone for something that's a bit of a compromise between King Kong and Tom Baker there. And this is really impressive. I think this is they've kind of pitched this perfectly, I think. Clearly, he's overbearing, he's really tall, he's really menacing, but he's not too big that it becomes unmanageable or silly. I also just really like the fact that they've picked a character that isn't well loved particularly, but looks absolutely fantastic in figure form. Okay, for number 3 I have Omega. Omega's a really significant character in the show, and he has a really, really cool look and design. But it's one that I think could have been tricky to pull off in action figure form, but nevertheless, I feel like Character Options nailed it. I think they did a really, really good job of this. He's bright and colourful and visually very arresting. Whenever he's on display, he instantly jumps out to the eye. The sculpting on this headpiece in particular is awesome. I also really like that they got the collar absolutely accurate, even going so far as to get the discrepancy between the two colour tones. And once again, the paint apps are fantastic. They've made the most of this opportunity to really enhance the sculpt with a good paint wash over there to really just draw out all those details. And the helmet looks really weathered and well worn, which is brilliant. And of course, one of the main reasons this jumps out at you on the shelf is because he's got this cotton tunic here. Again, this is really nicely applied. It's very shiny material as well. It's got little specks in it that just catch the light so it looks really sparkly. And this could have been a disaster. It could have looked really silly, but it actually works tremendously well. And because it's a soft material, it doesn't hinder the articulation whatsoever. And to be fair, Character Options has gone one better and actually revealed to us what Omega's costume looks like underneath this cowl. And it's quite armoured, and it's just a cool look. I think this is dramatic license, but they've done very, very well with this. It reminds me an awful lot of, say, Doctor Doom or someone like that, which is kind of cool. He's also one of those figures in the line that has that fantastic shoulder articulation to allow the arms to just arch up and out, which is great and really crucial for this figure. Also, you may notice they've sculpted the gauntlets in one piece. So whilst there isn't an opportunity for wrist articulation as such, they are moulded into the shape that you would want to recreate from the TV show. And also, they do serve as a hard, solid plastic that serves to make sure that the cowl isn't going to pull loose and tear free. But of course, my number one favourite thing about this figure is the fact that you can pull the head off, just like as happens in the show, and of course there's nothing underneath it. And I just think this is so wonderfully rendered, it's so well done, and yeah, top marks to them for doing this. And number 2, I have another deluxe figure, and this is the Axon. And of course, I mean the fully revealed, true form version of the Axon. I absolutely love this figure, and Character Options clearly did too, because they went on to re-release it as the Crinoid, this time with a green paint wash, which is entirely appropriate because that's exactly what they did in the TV show as well. I absolutely love all the love and care that went into this figure, particularly in the paint apps. It's absolutely astonishing because we've got all sorts of different colours going on here. It's not just one tone, there's multiple different tones running through every part of this figure. We have pinks, reds, browns. Visually, it's just incredibly striking. And the sculpting for this figure is insane. There's so much detail here, which is just amazing. All those veins, all those different protrusions and bits and pieces. It's just an incredible sculpt. Like, there's just so much detail to it. And then the paint over it. They've just really made the most of every single piece of this, and it just works so well. Like, this is a masterpiece, really. Now, curiously, unlike the others in this line that I've been talking about so far, I'm not sure if I would say that this is the most accurate sculpt of the lot. Certainly, if we look at this image here, we can see it's a lot more weed-like. There's a lot more of those veins protruding everywhere, and it's kind of like a bush of, of veins and things, more than what we have here in the figure, which is a properly sculpted face with clear eyes and a mouth. And normally I'd be really critical of that, except I do think that this is really, really well done. And I think I actually prefer the figure version. It actually looks more monstrous to me because it has those human features almost. But again, here's a close look. This is the reverse of the figure, and again, they've just not missed any opportunity really at all to just really make the most of this. So we've got all these little extra pieces that are flexible plastic and rubber and just hang down, and look, the figure just looks like it's oozing, and it's just really incredibly well done. I also really like the articulation on this figure. So yeah, he's got a swivel for the head, so there's nothing too impressive about that particularly, but he does have these ball jointed arms and legs, which really kick out to the side and just gives this whole range of motion to this figure that this line doesn't normally enjoy. And it feels like they've tried to really make the most of this deluxe figure, give him as much articulation as they could when they didn't even need to, say for example with the feet there, but he's got it anyway, which is brilliant. And when you have the arms fully spread out like this, like it's quite immense. This is a really tall figure. This is quite a big fella, and his wingspan there is absolutely huge. And he just absolutely dominates any display that he's in. And to give you a sense of the scale, here he is with the Master, and this is actually a 2-pack. Both of these figures came in the one deluxe set, and it's really impressive. You put them back to back, then you can just see how much taller he is, how much wider he is, and just really overbearing. So who's got the top spot? Well, I've got the Sontaran. Now, it's always difficult when you're picking a number 1 because you can wrestle back and forth, but there's a few factors that made me zero in on this. But I should probably clarify that here I'm using Store from the Invasion of Time, mainly because I think he best represents all the things I'm going to talk about. But to be fair, this could be any of the others. It could be Lynx, it could be Styre. Any of the classic Sontarans fits the bill. So first off, presentation. I just love the paint apps on this. I love the texture of the costume. Somehow they've created that leather look effect even though it is just plastic and rubber. but somehow it manages to catch the light so nicely. One of the things I always enjoy is when the accessory can be removed, when there's an extra head or there's a helmet, and of course the Sontaran comes with a helmet. So in this case, Storr has a bit of extra decoration. He's obviously got that sort of crown, which I think is an extra nice touch. I really like that. But yeah, you can slide this on, you can slide it off, and underneath you've got Spudhead himself. And this is such a fantastic sculpt. It just looks absolutely brilliant. And in the case of Storr, there's actually a lot of different paint apps going on here. So we've got the darkness around the eyes, but some of the lighter skin tone around the face as well. And of course the red lips. I just think it's really enhanced. It's making the most of this sculpt. Some of the others, of course, have little goatees, little wispy bits, which is kind of cool. And at the back of the neck, of course, they've got the Probic vent there as well, which is a nice little detail, really essential one they couldn't do without, but it's cool to see it there. Also, one thing I would point out is that you might think that given the shape of the head and how screwed on it is to the body, that it wouldn't be articulated, but it does, it swivels. And again, in the case of Storr, I really like how on his belt he's got these extra bits and pieces, especially because they're so bright and colourful, adding a little bit of colour to what would be quite a dull sort of two-tone colour scheme to this figure. Also, I really like both the sculpt of the boots, which vary between black and grey, or depending on which Sontaran you're looking at. But again, they're nicely sculpted again, they've got that slight look of armour going on. But one of the key things is the kneecaps, and also on the elbows. They have these rubber pieces which work so well because they hide the articulation, so those joints when they bend and turn, well, they're really nicely hidden here because of this. And these are soft rubber pieces, so they look really good, they look very authentic to what we see on the show, but they also serve a really cool purpose. And they all come with their laser weapon, for lack of a better term. But it's really cool, it's a very distinctive prop, and it fits so perfectly into their grip. Their hand is moulded perfectly to hold that, and considering they only have 3 fingers, that's quite an achievement. It's really very, very nicely done, nicely sculpted, nicely painted. And best of all, he has a little holster, and it just slides in there. Again, nice tight fit, and it looks really good. And the other piece of the puzzle is that at least 2 of the Sontarans came with their ship. Now, Storr actually didn't, but Lynx and Styr both did. And this is a really cool extra touch, because this is just something that we don't really get in the Doctor Who universe. We never really have many vehicles and spaceships, not in this line. So this is one of the few. We have the TARDIS, and we have the Sontaran ship, which is just awesome. Now, I think it looks absolutely fantastic. It's really nicely painted. There's some nice paint wash and detailing going on there. It's not perfect, however, because it does have this opening door, which, wow, you think that's going to be really great. He's going to be able to sit in it. But it's almost completely redundant, to be honest, because it doesn't have a lot of depth at all. And the interior looks pretty naff. There's what's meant to look like I suppose, a view screen and a chair. I don't understand, because the vehicle itself is completely hollow. So they could have gone the extra mile and actually put a seat in there for him, but they didn't, sadly. So you just kind of have this sort of halfway measure, which in a way maybe would have been better if he hadn't bothered. But if nothing else, at least you can pose him in front of it so it looks like he's just come out of it. And this is really cool, and it's perfect for any diorama makers out there. You can really create a really interesting visual scene with this. And as I said, the exterior is faultless, really, and they've even gone to the extra mile here, which I really love on the base of actually creating the landing gears, like the scorch marks on it. Just really well painted, nicely sculpted, and I don't believe this is something we ever actually see in this show. So again, a little bit of creative license here, but really, really nicely done. And quite the reverse from some of the other figures on this list, but he is excellent in terms of his scale because he's shorter than the other figures. So again, he's distinctive, he's different, he just stands out as just being interesting. So there you have it, there's my top 10 classic monsters and aliens from character options. In the comments, please let me know, do you agree, do you disagree, was there someone really important that I left out? I have to be honest, I really wrestled with this. There were certain characters I actually went to the trouble of filming and then decided in the edit I wasn't going to include them. This was a really tough list to make, and I think, there are certainly other contenders who deserve recognition, but I think that really speaks to how strong this line is and just how well these figures were made. There's so many that it's really tough to get a top 10 out there. Anyway, join me next time as I'll be counting out my top 10 Doctors and companion figures. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a like and remember to subscribe as there'll be plenty more videos soon.